Okay, we're going to start on Daf Tezvav Amud Aleph. We're holding on the top of the Amud where it says Gufa Amr Rav Yudah Mashmul. Take 1 minute, it'll be over. Okay, so the Gemara here is discussing the Mishnah that brought 18 different things that was instituted in the Aliyah of Hananiah ben Chizkiah, where the Beis Shammai were more than Beis Hillel, and they instituted 18 things. So let's see the Lashon of the Gemara inside. Gufa. So regarding these 18 things that was mentioned before, Amar Rav Yudah Mashmuel Yud Ches Gazru, they instituted 18 things on that day. Ubi Yud Ches Nechlaku, and there was an argument between Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai regarding all these 18 things. So, Frek the Gemara. V'hatanya, we learned in a different Braise, Hushvu by Bayayim, Hushvu, that Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai all agreed on these 18 takanas. So it says Hushvu, they all agreed. So why are we saying here that they argued about these 18 things? And for the Gemara, by Bayayim Nechlaku, sorry about that, by Bayayim Nechlaku, on that day they did argue, but Ulamachar Hushvu. On the next day, the Beis Hillel did agree to Beis Shammai to all of the Gezeiros that were instituted. Another thing that was mentioned before, Amar Rav Huna, Begimel Mekaimis Nechlaku Shammai veHillel. There are 3 places that Shammai and Hillel themselves argued. It wasn't Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, but Hillel and Shammai themselves. So the Gemara now is going to bring from the Mishnayos of Idias, what are these 3 cases that Shammai and Hillel argue themselves? Shammai Yomer. So the first halacha is regarding how large does the challah, or actually the flour used when you're making a dough, have to be in order to be chayiv in the mitzvah of challah. Shammai Yomer mikav. The size has to be the measurement of a kav of flour, challah. Hillel says mikabayim, has to be the measurement of the flour should be 2 kavs. The Chachamim say we don't follow either opinion, el kav umechza, a kav and a half. So in between Hillel and Shammai. Then it's chayiv b'chala. When the size of measurements were made bigger, as it's brought over here in Rashi, that when they moved to Tzipairi, so then they changed the way they measured, and whatever was measured before, they added a 5th to the measurement. So Amru, they said, Chameshes Revoim Kemach Chayavim B'chala. If you have 5 Revoim of Kemach, you chayav b'chala. Revoim is a lug. If you have 5 lugin of Kemach, then you chayav b'chala. The reason why a lug is called a reva is because 4 lugin makes up a kav. So therefore 1 lug is a quarter of a kav. So before, Chachamim said that the shear of a challah was a kav umechza, which would be 6 lugin. But then when the measuring became larger, so they brought it down to 5 lugin. And this is the actual final halacha that's brought in Shulchan Aruch. When you make challah, so the amount of flour used for the challah is chameshes revoim kemach, then you chayav challah. Rabbi Yosi Omer, hey peturin, if you have 5 lugin of flour, you're going to be pater. Hey v'oid, but if you have 5 and a drop more, then chayavim, then you chayav. So Rabbi Yosi is basically agreeing to the Chachamim. The only thing that he's adding is it has to be a drop more, and the reason is because Rabbi Yosi's opinion is that the shiurim that they were mishayer, from the way the shiurim were then, amal, today our eggs, all of our things are a little bit smaller. So therefore when we're meshayir today, you have to add a little bit more. But this is the halacha that we paskin like the Chachamim. Just, I'm not going to go through the whole cheshbon over here by Arichis Benigeh to what the basis of this argument of Hillel and Shammai and the Chachamim is, but I'll just say what Rashi brings here. This all revolves around the mon. The shear that it says by the mon, that the Isa of the mon was an asiris ha'efa. So they're all basing their shear of challah around how we measure what the size of the mon was, and that is the size of the challah, or of the dough, the flour that's chayiv in the mitzvah of challah. So this is one situation where Hillel and Shammai argued. Then there was another one, V'idach, another case, Hillel Omer. So here we're talking about a mikveh. Of course we know a mikveh, in order to be kosher, has to be meik shomim, only rainwater. If drawn water, mayim she'uvim, falls into a mikveh, and you're talking about a mikveh that's not 40 saw. If the mikveh has already the minimum amount of 40 saw, then any other water that falls into it, in most cases, it doesn't make the mikveh possible. We're talking here, however, about a mikveh that's less than 40 saw, and then you have mayim she'uvim that fall into it. How much mayim she'uvim makes the mikveh possible? Hillel Omer, Meloi hin, mayim she'uvim paislim es ha-mikveh. If you have a hin, which Rashi says is 12 lug of mayim she'uvim, that passes the mikveh. Now the Mishnah just adds, parenthetically, this expression of hin is not a regular kind of expression that's used in a measurement in the times of Chazal, because this wasn't a measurement in the times of Chazal. The word hin comes from the Torah. So why did he use the Lashon hin? Why didn't he just say 12 lug? Shechayev adam loyma b'lashon rabbi. A person is chayev to repeat things the way he heard it from his teacher. And he heard from his teacher the shear of a hin. Shammai says much more. Tisha kabin, 9 kabin of mayim shuvim that fall into a mikveh. So like I said before, every kav is 4 lugin. So that's much more than what Hillel said. Shammai is being makel here, that means. The Chachamim Oimrim, and the Chachamim say, loike divrei zeh, v'loike divrei zeh, not like Hillel, not like Shammai. Chabo, beis gardiim, mishara ashpa, 2 weavers came out of Yerushalayim from the Shar HaAshpa, the gateway of the Ashpa from Yerushalayim. V'ha'idu mishum Shmai v'Avtalion, and they testified in the name of Shmai and Avtalion. Sheshloisha lugim mayim shuvim, even just 3 lugim of drawn water, paislim es ha-mikveh, will passel the mikveh. V'kaimu chachamim es devreim, and the chachamim will mekayim their words, and this is the psak halacha, a mikveh that's less than 40 saw. If 3 lugim of mayim shuvim falls into it, it passels the mikveh. So let me just point out 2 things. First of all, we're learning about Hilchas Mikvahs over here today, and I believe most people didn't have an opportunity to go to the mikveh, not today, not yesterday, and may not have the opportunity to go to the mikveh for a long period of time. We know Kalaisik B'Tayra Sayla Kilo Hikrivaila. So you're learning about mikveh, so let this be another inyan as if you're going to the mikveh. B'chlal, it says on the day that you can't go to the mikveh. We learned this in Gemara Brachas, if anybody remembers. You can take a shower. You stand under the shower for about 2-3 minutes, and it counts like a mikveh to some extent. And the Rebbe would write in letters also that you could learn Mishnayos Taharis, a Mishnah Masechta Taharis, also for in the place of mikveh. Another thing, a very interesting thing that Rashi points out over here is, why does the Mishnah tell us who it was that said the shear that Chachamim held of? There were 2 weavers that came out of the Shara Ashpa of Yerushalayim. Very unusual. So Rashi says, what this teaches us is, even when you have simple people, here you had 2 weavers, that is not a very prominent kind of a job. And where were they living? They were living in the Shara Ashpa of Yerushalayim. And they were the ones that wore Bismedrish and heard the statement of Shmai and Avtalion. And they were the ones that was Zeicha, that their opinion was accepted by the Chachamim. So nobody should ever say to themselves, I'm going to come into the Bismedrish, who am I? Nobody's going to listen to my opinion. Nobody cares if I'm here, if I'm not here. So over here we see there were 2 simple weavers, and they were living in the lowest area of Yerushalayim, and their opinion was accepted by the Chachamim. That's why the Mishnah brings their names and who they were and where they lived. The third case, the third case where Shammai and Hillel argued, Shammai Yomer Kol Anoshim Dayan Shaiton. So what we're talking about over here is a woman that has a re'iyah, that observes a re'iyah of dam, of blood, which makes her a nida, of course, or makes her tameh. So the question is, does she become tameh only from the moment when she observed the blood, or do we say that possibly the blood was there from before? So Shammai says, Kol Anoshim, all women, and this includes, there's different kinds of women. The one that maybe this includes even a woman that was pregnant, or other women that you sort of would assume that they didn't see any blood before they actually saw. So Shammai says, Kol Anoshim Dayan Shaiton. From the time when they saw, that's when they're tamei. Anything that they touched beforehand does not become tamei. Hillel says, mi pekida le pekida. That the tumah goes back, we have to suspect that maybe from the time that they examined themselves, the earlier time, and from after that, they may have been tamei, they just weren't aware of it. And va'afile liyamim harba, even if this goes back many days. Chachamim disagree with both Shammai and Hillel's opinion. Like divrei zeh v'loike divrei zeh. Ella rather, me'eis le'eis. So there's a 24-hour period. That's usually what you go according to. You go back, the tumah goes back a 24-hour period. But memayit al yedei mipkida lepkida. But if a woman examined herself under 24 hours, so then
minutes, it has to be this minute.
That will minimize the time of when the tumah goes back, because she examined herself. Umipkida lepkida. If a woman examined herself and it was more than 24 hours, memayit al yad me'eis le'eis. So then the maximum that you go back is 24 hours. So the opinion of the Chachamim is that the maximum you go back is 24 hours, or it could even be less than that if she examined herself within 24 hours. So this was the third case where Hillel and Shammai themselves argued, not Beis Shammai and not Beis Hillel. So now the Gemara asks the question, V'su leka? These are the only three cases where Hillel and Shammai themselves argued. V'ha'ike, we have the following case. V'ha'ike, we have the following case of Hillel Oimer Lismaich. So this is talking about a carbon that's brought on Yontif. So Hillel says, Lismaich, you can do smicha on the behemah on Yontif. Now the issue with smicha is a gzeira midrabanan, not to do smicha on Yontif, just like we don't ride an animal on Yontif, we don't do smicha on Yontif either. So Hillel says you can do smicha on Yontif. Shammai yomer shalei lismaich. Shammai says you don't do the smicha on Yontif, you can do the smicha before Yontif, and then you bring the carbon on Yontif. Hillel's opinion is the smicha must be dafke right near the shchita, so you can't do the smicha before. Smicha, the smicha on the behemoth before the carbon. And Shammai holds that the smicha could be done earlier on, so therefore it has to be done before Yontif. So we see another argument between Hillel and Shammai. So the Gemara answers, Ki ka'am Rav Huna, when Rav Huna said there were only three arguments between Hillel and Shammai, Heiche the leke plukte the Rav bahadayu. If there weren't other great people that argued about the same subject. Here, regarding this shaila of smicha on Yantif, it's an argument between Hillel and Shammai, but there were others that also argued about this, as Rashi brings. This was an early argument already from much earlier before. Another case, for ha'iked, there's another case where Hillel and Shammai argued, ha'baitzer legas. So here what this is talking about is a person that's cutting the grapes from the vineyard. So we learned before in the Gemara, 2 or 3 blot ago, where the Gemara says that in order for food to become susceptible to tumah, it has to have water that came on the produce. And that water has to come on the produce willingly, that the person is satisfied that the water came on it. So now when a person is cutting the grapes, and some of the wine of the grapes could be coming out while you're cutting it, the person is not really interested in that wine coming out. He wants to save the wine for when he brings it to the press, but some wine might be coming out. Is that wine that comes out and makes the grapes wet, does that make it prepared and susceptible for tumah? Shammai says it is susceptible for tumah. Hillel says it does not make it susceptible for tumah. So here we see another argument between Hillel and Shammai themselves, and not Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. And for the Gemara, bar minei. No, besides this case, why? In that case, Hillel agreed to Shammai, and that this is the Rashi brings over here. This was on the day that Hillel agreed to Shammai, and therefore this didn't remain a machlokes between the two of them. Now the Gemara goes back to something that was brought earlier on in a Braise, a statement that we had before, and the Gemara is going to examine this and go through this for about 2 blot. Let's see. Yaisi ben Yezer ish Tzreida, v'Yaisi ben Yechanan ish Yerushalayim. There were these two people by the name of Yaisi ben Yezer and Yaisi ben Yechanan, and they were from Yerushalayim, or at least Yaisi ben Yechanan was from Yerushalayim, and Yaisi ben Yezer was from Tzreida. Gazru Tuma al Eretz Amim. They're the ones that made the Tumah on Eretz Amim, outside Eretz Yisrael, Val Kli Zechuchis, and they also made the Gzeira on glass that it becomes Tameh. So the Gemara discusses the Gzeira that there is on Eretz Amim. Frek the Gemara, V'harabanon the Shmoinim Shana Gazer. Don't we know that the Rabbanon that lived 80 years before the Churban of the Beis HaMikdash, they're the ones that made the Gzeira that outside Eretz Yisrael should be Tameh. And the Gemara brings the source for this. The Rav Kahane Keshachol Rabbi Shmuel Bar Yaisi. When Rabbi Shmuel Bar Yaisi became sick, Shalchol Loi Rabbi Emoir Lanu Beis V'Gimel Dvarim Sha'amarta Mishum Avicha. Tell us over 2 or 3 things in the name of your father. So his father was Rabbi Yaisi Mechalafta, and his father was the one that wrote the Sefer Seder Olam. So he knew the history of Klal Yisrael very well. So they wanted to hear a few things from him in the name of his father. Omar, so he said to them, so Shalach Lem, he sent back to them, Kach Omar Abba. This is what my father said. Kuf Pei Shana, Achale Chorav Abayis, 180 years before the Churban Abayis, Pashta Malchus Arishal Yisrael. The wicked kingdom, which is the Romans, was already spread out upon Yidden. 80 years before the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, Gazru Tumah al Eretz Amim. That's when they instituted the Gzeira of Tumah on Eretz Amim, Val Kli Zechuchis, and also that Kli Zechuchis becomes Tameh. Mem Shana Charav Abayis. 40 years before the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, Golsala Sanhedrin, the Sanhedrin was exiled from where it was in the Beis HaMikdash, V'yashvala b'Chanuyos, and instead they resided in a place in Chanuyos, that's what it's called, Chanuyos, which is also on the Har HaBayis. So the Gemara interrupts and asks regarding this last detail here, Lamai Hilchasa, why does it matter that the Sanhedrin is not in its place in the Beis HaMikdash and it's outside on the Har HaBayis? Omer Rav Yitzchak bar Avdimi, Loimar Shaleidonu Dine Knossos. This is to say that once the Sanhedrin is not in its place, they can't be done Dine Knossos. Any penalties, to be mechayiv somebody money, to pay what he owes, or any damages, that yes. But any knas, once they're not in their place, they can't be done. Frek the Gemara, Dine Knossos al Kedaitach? Do you think that Bezdin can't be done Dine Knossos if they're not in their place? Why not? What would be the reason they can't? Ella, so the Gemara changes and says, Ella Eimesh Shaleidonu Dine Nefashis. Once the Sanhedrin it's not in its place in Yerushalayim, so no Bezdin is allowed to be done Dine Nefashis. And this is learned out from Psukim, this is a Gemara in Sanhedrin. Here's not the place for this, but even though it's not only the Sanhedrin in Yerushalayim that's done Din Nefashis. Any Bezdin of 23 anywhere could be done Din Nefashis, but that's only if the Sanhedrin of 71 is in its place in Yerushalayim. Once they were not in their place in Yerushalayim, in the Lishkas HaGazos in the Beis HaMikdash, that's when they stopped capital punishment, Din Nefashis. So we're back to our question. How can we say that Yaisi ben Yezer and Yaisi ben Yechanan are the ones that made the Gzeir on Tumah Eretz Amim? It says over here that this was made 80 years before the Churban of the Beis HaMikdash. If you'll argue and say, B'pei Shana Nami Inohava. In that time period of 80 years before the Churban, that's when the Yaisi ben Yezer and Yaisi ben Yechanan lived. So the Gemara says, no, that can't be. We learned in Abraisa, Hillel, Shimon, Gamliel, Shimon. These 4 generations. Hillel, his son Shimon, his son Gamliel, and then his son Shimon. Their leadership upon Klal Yisrael was for the last 100 years before the Churban of the Beis HaMikdash. So if so, Yaisi ben Yezer ish Tzreide v'Yaisi ben Yechanan have a kod metuva. The 2 individuals, Yaisi ben Yezer and Yaisi ben Yechanan, they were much before Hillel and Shammai. And as Rashi says over here, you could see it in Masechta Avos. Right in the beginning of the Masechta Avos, it starts with Yaisi ben Yechanan and Yaisi ben Yezer, and then there's Shmai and Naphtalian, and only later comes Hillel and Shammai. So they were much before. So you can't say that they were in this time period. So the Gemara, turning to the next Amid, says another answer. Ella, rather, what happened was, also Inhu, the two Yaisis came along, and Gozer Agusha. They made a Gzeira on the actual earth that we should consider it to be Tameh. And the reason for this is because the Goyim sometimes bury their dead in places without making any sign of any cave or anything. So they were geyser on the earth itself. And that's not only if you go into Chutz La'aretz and you're on the earth, but even if you bring a piece of that earth into Eretz Yisrael and you touch it, you also become Tameh. Lisraif. And the Gzeira was that if you walk on this earth, you touch this earth, so then the Truma, that is, the Truma touches this earth or comes on this earth, you have to burn that Truma. But then on the Avir, if you enter into the ear space without touching the ground itself, like for example, if a person's riding on a wagon or riding on a donkey, but it has to be in a case where there's a space, there's an opening in the wagon to the ground, or there's an opening from the person riding on the donkey to the ground. Because if he's enclosed, then there's no Gzeira on the Avir. So it's open, there's a space open to the ground. So on the Avir, v'loy klum, they did not make a Gzeira at that point yet. Then v'asar Rabbanon the Peishana, then the Rabbanon 80 years before the Churban Abayis, and they came and Gozer Avira. They added and they said, they made a Gzeira that also the Avir of Chutz La'aretz is Tameh. But here they didn't make the Gzeira with the same severity like they made it on the earth of Chutz La'aretz. And let me just explain this. We had this already before. When it comes to Truma, usually the halacha with Truma is, if it's Truma which is Tahir, you have to eat it. If it's Truma which is Tameh, you have to burn it. But there are certain situations where there's like a suffix Truma or things like that, where you can't eat it, but you're not allowed to burn it either, because you don't know for sure it's Tameh. You can't just go and burn Truma, so you have to just leave it. You have to leave it until it rots, and then it's not right to eat, and then you can burn it. So over here, the Gemara says, when they made the Gzeira on the Avir, that if the Truma comes into the ear space of Chutz La'aretz, so what was the Gzeira? Litlois, to leave it. Not to burn it, but just to leave it. So these were the two stages of the Gzeira. So now the Gemara questions this. The Memre, shall we say, the Bach is guidance over here, the Tchila Chode Gezer Tahava L'Sreifa. The right in the beginning, their Gzeira regarding touching the ground of Chutz La'aretz, the Gzeira originally was that the Truma that touches the ground has to be burnt. But this is not so, because V'ha'ama Ilfe said, and when the Gemara quoted this already yesterday before, Yadayim Tchilas Gezeras on L'Sreifa. The Gzeira that they made on a person's hands, that it's a Sheni L'Tuma, and if Truma touches it, the Gzeira originally was Truma that touches a person's hands that were not washed, it has to be burnt. So what do we see from this? Yadayim hu the tchilas gzeiras l'sreifa. By the hands, that was the beginning of the gzeira. The truma that touches a person's hands has to be burnt. Hamidi achrine, but other things that they made the gzeira, loy, that wasn't the gzeira originally. The gzeira originally was that you have to leave it, you have to put it aside, but not that you have to burn it. So therefore the Gemara is going to switch now what it said before. Ella, rather we have to say as follows. Also Inu, the two Yaisis came, and Gozor, Agusha, their Gzeira originally was that if the Truma touches the gush, the actual ground of Chutz La'aretz Litlois, they have to put it aside, you have to leave it. Va'avira v'loy klum. Truma that enters into the ear space of Chutz La'aretz, there was no Gzeira whatsoever. Then va'asar Rabbanon the Peishon, had the Rabbanon 80 years before the Churban Abayis came along, Gozor Agusha Lisraif, they made the Gzeira on the gush more severe, that if the Truma touches the ground, you have to burn the Truma. The Avira Litlois, and they also added the Gzeira that the Avir, if it enters into the ear space of Chutz La'aretz, you have to put it aside. You don't have to burn it, but you have to put it aside. So those were the two stages of the Gzeira. The Gemara is still not satisfied. Fragt the Gemara, Va'akati b'usha gazor, but we know based on a statement that the Gemara will bring here, a statement on a Mishnah, that this Gzeira of the Tumah in Eretz Ha'amim was made much later on. It was made when the Yidden came to Usha, which is much further away in Eretz Yisrael. What happened in Usha? So the Gemara here brings a Mishnah. The Tnan, we learned in a Mishnah, Alvav Sveikais Sarfenes Truma. There are 6 scenarios of Safek Tumah that you have to burn the Truma if this Safek Tumah happens. What are the 6 Sveikis? Al Safek Beis HaPras. Tumah that enters into a Beis HaPras. A Beis HaPras is a field, it's an area where there is a suffix if there was a caver there. There was a caver somewhere in the field and we don't know where it is. So the entire area becomes a Beis HaPras, a suffix Tumah. Val Safik Ofar Haba Me'eretz Ha'amim. And also on earth, that's a suffix whether it came from Eretz Ha'amim. Because, again, it's an Eretz Ha'amim. It doesn't mean suffix if it's earth from Eretz Ha'amim. It means all earth of Eretz Ha'amim, there were geyser tumah on it because it's a suffix that the Goyim bury their dead here. So right over here we see that this is one of the things that there were geyser al Eretz Ha'amim. Val Safik Bigdei Amaretz. And also on a suffix tumah from the begodim of an Amaretz. Begodim that come from an Amaretz, he's not careful. It could be his wife was a Nida and she sat on it and she made the begodim Tomei. So if Truma touches it, you have to burn the Truma. Val Safik Kalim Anim Tzoim. You have kalim that were found, and we have no idea where these kalim are from. They might be tomei, so if the truma touches it, you have to burn it. Val safek haroikin. If there's any spittle that's on the ground and the truma touched it, it could also, you never know, it could come from a zav, it could come from someone that's tomei. Val safek meiraglei adam. And also if there's meiraglaim of a person and the truma touches it, it also becomes a safek tumah. And the Mishnah adds shekeneged meiraglei behema. That includes even in a case where the meiraglaim of a human being is right near the meiraglaim of a behema, and you might think so if so, it doesn't come from a human being, so it doesn't come from a source of tumah, but still there were geyser that if the truma touches it, so it's a safek tumah. And al vadai magon, if the truma definitely touched any of these things, and the girsa on the side of the Gemara here is shehu safek tumason, which is a safek tumah, sarfenes truma. For this you have to burn the truma. Rabbi Yosi says, af al safik magon, not only if you know for sure that the truma touched any of these things, but even if it was just a suffix whether the truma touched any of these things, b'rishus hayachid sarfen. If this happened in the rishus hayachid, you have to burn the truma. We had this already in the Gemara before. When it comes to a suffix truma and rishus hayachid, we're more machmer. The Chachamim argue and say, b'rishus hayachid, if the suffix tumah happens in the rishus hayachid, toilin, so then you have to put it aside. You don't burn it, you don't eat it, but you have to put it aside. B'rishus harabim, if there's a suffix, if it touched any of these things in the rishus harabim, tahayrin. So then it's tar, you don't have to burn it whatsoever. Till here is the Mishnah. One of the things that it said in the Mishnah was Afar Haba Me Eretz Ha'amim, which is what we're talking about. The fact that there was a gzeira on the earth of Eretz Ha'amim. Now what does it say on this Mishnah? So all is said on this Mishnah, Eilu Vav Sfeikos, these 4 Sfeikos Tumah that Chachamim, 6 Sfeikos Tumah that Chachamim were geyser, Hiskino Be'usha Hiskino, that Takana was made in Usha, which was much later after the Churban of the Beis HaMikdash. So how can we say that the Takana was made by the 2 Yosis, Yosi ben Yehuda and Yosi ben Yochanan, and then it was made in the 80 years before the Churban of the Beis HaMikdash? Elo, so the Gemara now says as follows. There were really 3 stages to the way this Gzeira was made. Asu Inu, the 2 Yosis, they came, Gazor, Agusha, Litlis. They made a Gzeira which was more lenient. The Gzeira was on the earth of Eretz Ha'amim, if Truma touches it, Litlis. You have to leave it, you have to put it aside. Va'avira v'loi klum. The Truma that enters into the airspace of the Eretz Ha'amim, nothing, there was no Gzeira. Then the second stage of the Gzeira. V'aser Rabbanon, the Shmoinim Shana. The Rabbanon, 80 years before the Churban of the Beis HaMikdash, they came. Gazor idi v'idi litlois. They made a Gzeira that both, if it touches the earth, if it enters into the airspace of Eretz Ha'amim, you have to put it aside. But none of them made a Gzeira that you have to burn the Truma in any of these cases. And then, V'asu b'usha, later they came in Usha, Gosor agusha lisraif. That's when they made the Gzeira more severe, and they said that if it touched the actual earth, you have to burn the Truma. V'a'avire k'dekoi koi. But the gzeira on the ear space of Eretz Amim, that remained as is, and they didn't change that gzeira, and it only has to be put aside and you don't burn it. So this is the end of the discussion in the Gemara B'nigeya to the gzeira on Eretz Amim, that there were 3 different stages to this gzeira. Now the Gemara is going to continue b'negei to kli zechuchis, the fact that it said over there in the Braise that they were geyser, that glass becomes tummy, and glass is not mentioned anywhere in the Torah. Well, you have in the Torah kli cheres, you have in the Torah mentioned metal kalim, wooden kalim, but kli zechuchis is not mentioned in the Torah, so maybe it's not susceptible to tumah. So the Chachamim were Mesakin and said that Kli Zchuchis is susceptible to Tumah. The Sugya begins right over here and it continues through most of Daf Tezayin Amud Beis, and we'll leave it in Mitzvah Shem for tomorrow. Daf Tezayin is a shorter blot, and we'll start this Gemara Kli Zchuchis in Mitzvah Shem tomorrow. Agot Tavach everybody, Agot Tavach.